hello, Ian.
Hi, Brenda.
All righty. So,
can you see me okay? Let me just expand the screen. Here we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
There we go. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming, and thank you especially Ian. For those of you who don't know Ian is a very talented, a very generous, UK-based urban sketcher and artist, and he's an educator in the British school system with a huge body of work and online classes. And so today, Ian's very kindly agreed to give us a tour of his sketchbooks. So take it away, Ian.
Thanks, Brenda. Hi everyone. Give us a wave, guys. I can see some of you. Give us a wave. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much. My God, what a world we're in at the moment. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? But it's great just to see so many people out there sketching online and posting stuff online. So what I'm planning on doing for you is just doing like a little bit of a sketchbook tour. I'm just going to go through my sketchbook. I'm going to show you some work that I've done, and I'm going to tell you some stories and just enjoy. And if you've got any questions for me, please ping them up on the screen, and I'll try and respond to any kind of individual questions that people might have. So I'm going to show you two sketchbooks. The first one I'm going to show you is the one of Liverpool. And I live about half an hour away from Liverpool. So I've been sketching Liverpool for about five years, probably, as a serious kind of urban sketcher. But prior to that, I've been going over there and doing lots of little doodles and things for a long, long time. So I know Liverpool really, really well. And then the other sketchbook I thought I'd show you is the one of Amsterdam, which is nowhere near where I live because I live in the UK. So it's quite a nice contrast to look at two sketchbooks, one of a place where I'm really familiar and another one of somewhere where I'm not so familiar. And the idea is I'm just going to go through the sketchbooks and tell you loads and loads of like little funny stories. Because the great thing about urban sketching, as you know, is you're creating memories and stories for yourself all the time. It's not like working from a photograph in the studio, which is instantly forgettable. You're actually remembering the experience of being there, which is just really powerful and so good for you. And so when I look through my sketchbooks, I remember not so much the act of doing it, although I can remember doing it, but I remember the people that I meet and how I felt and my energy levels and the temperature and all those kind of things that happen. So this is my Liverpool sketchbook. I'll just tilt that down so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so this is the Fabriano sketchbook. It's kind of A3 in size, and the first one was done about 4 or 5 years ago. This is kind of one of the first sort of urban sketches that I did when I put so much detail in, because prior to that I was probably working quite small, but obviously this is a lot bigger. And this is Chinatown in Liverpool. And I can still remember the coldness of drawing this and how freezing cold it was, and getting so kind of completely sidetracked by all of these cobbles. So it started off very much trying to kind of record the street scene and the pagoda and all the kind of Chinese imagery that you can kind of see, but then you get sidetracked in the process, and then it becomes very much about the cobbles on the street, which is just great, really cool. And then the next one, this is Liverpool again, and this is down by the Albert Dock. And the starting point for this was this huge bright red life buoy. So that was the first thing that I actually painted, and then everything kind of fitted around it. So that was the starting point. That was the kind of the first bit of structure that went down on the page, and everything just kind of fitted around it, which was really cool. So I didn't sketch this one out like I often do now. I just pinged that bright cadmium red right in the center, and everything kind of structured around it. And then moving on, this is Matthew Street. So as you know, Liverpool is really famous for the Beatles, John, Paul, George and Ringo. This is Matthew Street. I love signage, and I'm really interested in how signage can be integrated into the rest of the picture. So there's an awful lot of signage going on in this picture, lots of posters, lots of shop signs, and lots of banners going across the street. And I just find lettering just fascinating in how you can kind of integrate it, because it's reading the picture, in a visual way and also in a kind of like a storytelling way as well. And I just find that really interesting. It's just a really cool thing to do. This is Slater Street, and this is the street where the satellite dishes grow. And it took me about 2 hours of looking and recording this to actually realise how many satellite dishes were growing on this street. So I just thought there was one or two. But this is the great thing about urban sketching. It forces you to notice things. And you can actually see there's one up here, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. And it's just great. And that's what I love about drawing outside, because it just helps you to stop and see and think about how things are made up, and then you can start selecting those things, and then you can start telling your own stories about them. This is the Blue Coat Gallery in Liverpool, and I remember doing this was quite a few years ago, and it was pouring down with rain. So all these little splashes here is the actual rainwater coming down, because I painted this one first, so it had like a wash of paint on, and then the rain came, and the rain kind of activated the page and worked alongside me. So it wasn't just brushes, it was the actual rain coming down as well. And it started splattering this lovely kind of burnt sienna effect, and it started pinging some of the splashes across the page. And I like that. It's just the weather kind of getting involved as well, which is something that happens a lot in the UK.
Ian, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Of course you can.
Yeah, anybody, if you're joining late, Ian will take questions at the end of the interview. So go down to the little chat bubble at the bottom of the screen if you are in on a laptop anyway, and you can type in your question there. And if you've just joined late and you have unmuted yourself, please mute yourself, mute your microphone. Otherwise it will mess with the recording of this video. So thank you so much, everyone.
What would be really helpful for me as well, and to just try and help you guys out there, if there's any questions as I'm going along, I don't mind pausing all the time and responding to questions. So if there's something I've said and it doesn't make any sense, or you want me to repeat it again, or there's another picture you want me to go back to, that's absolutely fine. I mean, I really don't mind. We'll try and make it as interactive as we can.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Right, so back to Rodney Street. I'll tilt that forward. Okay, now Rodney Street is in the Georgian quarter of Liverpool.
A bit farther back, Ian, please, with your sketchbook.
Back a bit?
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
So this is the Georgian quarter, and this is the Anglican Cathedral. So this view is very much about the Anglican Cathedral, or that's how it started out. But when you're drawing, you start noticing other things, and some of the things become more important. So this sign here, which is just telling cyclists to go one way and pedestrians to go the other, became more important than the cathedral. And that's what I find fascinating about drawing on location, because you are in control. You can edit, you can select, you can dominate the scene. And I think that's a really liberating, refreshing thing, which you don't kind of get when you're working from a photograph. Because if it's a photograph, the photograph's going to dominate you. The photograph's going to control you. The photograph's going to be screaming back at you saying, draw me, paint me, put me, and all this kind of stuff. But when you're actually out there, living and breathing in the same three-dimensional space as what you're recording, you can control things and select things. So this guy here became more important than this, which in reality just would not happen at all.
Ian, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Go
for it.
Marinka is asking, Ian, what ink did you use while it was raining?
Okay, so all my pens that I use are permanent ink, and they will dry. They will dry really, really quickly, but you can't draw really on wet paper with them. For that, you need to use a water-soluble one, but then it's going to run. So if it's raining, I'd probably only, well, if it's raining really heavily, you just can't do it. But in the case of that picture I showed you before, it was just raining a little bit, so it just made the page a little bit damp. So you can do a little bit of painting, but just be mindful that, you know, it's gonna get a bit grim if you're out there for too long. So if it's splattering a little bit, if it's say a very, very light shower, you can paint, but you've got to be careful with your pens, because your pens will just get completely damaged. And if your page gets a little bit too soft, the nibs will actually rip the paper. So just be careful. You know, it's not something you kind of want to do on purpose, but if it does happen, there's ways around it. You know, you can. And the water soluble brush pens as well, they will still work a little bit during if it's raining. But again, if it's too wet, they'll stop working. You know, I think all these materials, they're not really designed to be working outside in the rain. So let's move on through the Liverpool Sketchbook. Okay, this is Abercrombie Square. I often paint a tree that cuts right across the composition. So this is the kind of the content of the picture, which is basically a front facade, and then the tree just gives it a much more kind of three-dimensional, much more kind of visually interesting element. And it's often a little device that I use. If you can see a tree cutting across, it just, and also if it's on an angle as well, it just gives you that nice little bit of tension. This is an interior. This is the Victoria building in Liverpool, and obviously watercolour paint was banned. They didn't let us use watercolour paint, so we just had to stick to colour instead, to black and white, using the brush pens instead of the colour. And this is like very much a kind of exercise just in perspective more than anything else. This was one of the coldest pictures I've ever done in Liverpool. It was absolutely bitter. So I'm kind of using colour in a much more kind of emotional way here. So rather than it being lots of kind of cold blues and greens, I've actually used this orange as a more kind of like emotional way, just to kind of warm myself up a little bit. And this is quite nice because you can really kind of control the colour. This is St. George's Hall. This was like a really busy junction. There was loads and loads of people trying to cross the road, and I was really getting in their way. So they're all getting kind of mega stressed out with me, which was quite funny. And you often find out when you're outside drawing, you know, you kind of get in people's way, especially in a busy kind of shopping area where there's loads of kind of people around. This is the Liverpool Philharmonic. And again, this comes back to lettering. I love the lettering. So when I drew this, the very first thing I did was I put Liverpool Philharmonic in and then framed it around there. So everything kind of fitted around this picture. So the starting point was the L, all the way across to the C. That was the first thing that was drawn. And then that acted as a kind of frame to structure the rest of the picture, rather than kind of drawing the picture first, then trying to get Liverpool Philharmonic in and then getting as far as the R and realizing you've got no more room. So it's just
we have a couple of questions here.
Way of doing it.
Do you want to be interrupted with questions now, or do you want to wait till the end?
No, go for it.
Okay, so somebody asked, what colors are in your palette?
Oh my God. Right, let me show you. The answer to that is basically every single colour. I'll show you this. I've got that palette, and I've got that palette, and I've got that palette. So I've got three. I've actually got four of these, but I can't find the other one. Okay, so I've got pretty much every single colour that I can get my hands on. But what I do, and this is really quite sad, is I order them I arrange them in a certain way. So I start off with white and yellow, and then the reds, and then the deep reds, all the way down there. And then I go into browns, and then greens, and then the kind of warm blues up to the dark blues, and then up to black. So it kind of goes on the same journey. And this one does exactly the same. All the way down there, from white to yellow to orange to red to deep red to the purples, and then the browns and the greens, and then the blues back up to black. And then this one does the same. And the reason I do that is because when I'm working, I haven't got a clue. I haven't got a clue what colour I'm using. I know exactly what it looks like, but I don't know what it's called. So I know exactly where they are in the palettes. So when I need a warm blue, I know to go there. I know cold blue's going to go there. I know deep red's going to go there. I know exactly where to find them. So in answer to that question, I've got every single colour you can imagine.
Yes, and you have a really big, long palette as well, don't you?
I do, but I only ever I take these with me, and I normally take all three of them with me, and then on this kind of spur of the moment, I decide which one I'm going to get out. So on this one, which is the Walker Art Gallery, this started off as burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and then these two guys came out to play, and then they just kind of pinged their way around the rest of the picture. So there's only a few colours on this one. Okay. And I use colour in a really kind of emotional way. So this is the cathedral, and this was a really warm summer's evening. It was absolutely gorgeous. So you can see how the colours have changed. You know, they're very kind of vibrant and bright, as is this one. This is the Albert Dock, and again, it's very kind of vibrant, and that's very much to do with the atmosphere and the temperature and your kind of energy levels and how you're feeling, you know, when you're doing something like that, which is, you know, just a lovely kind of experience to draw when it's warm, as opposed to when it's absolutely freezing cold. And you know, that's obviously going to affect your mood as well.
Ian, people are asking, what paper and weight do you use? And could you speak about your Tombows and the application of color?
So I use £140 Fabriano hot press, and it's A3 size, so it's 40 centimeters by 30. What was the other question?
Could you talk about your Tombows and the application of color?
It's meant to be a sketchbook tour, this.
I know, these people should really just they should really take your online workshop, Layers of Looking, and they will learn all your secrets in that online workshop.
Guys out there, you want everything from me. You want a sketchbook tour, you want me to be a technician as well. Right,
very
so
demanding.
They're so demanding. How long have we got left?
We have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Really 5 minutes.
Okay, right. These are Tombows. These are the brush pens. Okay, they're water soluble. These are used at the beginning of my drawings to sketch things out. So I use the little fine line bit at the beginning, and then I use the brushy bit at the end on top of the colour to calm things down. Okay, so on this one, for example, you can see I would have sketched it all out first with the fine line. Oh, no, wrong picture, sorry. Wrong one. This one. Where's it gone? This is the one I wanted to show you. This one. This is the Philharmonic dining rooms. So this would have been sketched out first of all with the fine liner, and then the brush pens would have gone on top of some of the colour and pinged inside some of these windows, and I would have used it in the shadows as well and all around there, all these kind of grey tones. So the brush pens are great because you can just calm down the paints. Now what I'd like to do, I'd like to very quickly contrast the Liverpool sketchbook with the Amsterdam one. So this is my Amsterdam sketchbook, okay? And I'll just flick through these fairly quickly. This was done a couple of years ago. This is the coldest drawing I've ever done in my life. Without a word of a lie, it was about -5 degrees. I was wrapped up like Michelin Man, about 6 layers on. I could hardly move, but it was just great fun. It was amazing. And I had to break away about every half an hour and go and get myself a coffee and thaw out. It was absolutely bitter. This is one of the old spring bridges that you see in Amsterdam. And again, it was bitterly cold when I did this. And a lady came out who owned the house that I was sitting outside. I was sitting on a bench, and there was a lady that owned the house, and she kept coming out with coffee and cakes for me. And it was just lovely. It was just a really lovely experience. And it's things like that that you remember, things like that that, you know, are just really lovely. This is probably one of my favourite urban sketches that I've done. This was right outside the hotel where I was staying, and this is Keizersgracht, I think it is. And I love the shape of the buildings and the architecture and the tones and how it all kind of knits together, and the little references to the bike, and then all the cobbles and all the patterns that they throw up. It's just the most visually stunning place. And I think what I like about the contrast between the Liverpool sketchbook and the Amsterdam sketchbook is the Liverpool sketchbook, I'll show you the very last one, is all about familiarity. It's all about things that I've spent the last however many years of my life being aware of. So I know these places really, really well. So because you know them, you can dig an awful lot deeper into the subject, and you can start seeing things Whereas with Amsterdam, because it's somewhere I'm not familiar with, the shapes are more kind of iconic, and you're probably stylizing things an awful lot more. You're not digging as deep. It's almost like things are a little bit more on the facade. You know, everything's very much on the surface because you're a spectator. It's somewhere that you're not as familiar with. And it was very much like that in New Orleans as well. You know, when I went to New Orleans, it was just like going into a sweetie shop for the first time, and you see all this amazing visual candy, and you just want to record things like the poles and the wires and the junctions and all the kind of stuff that you're not used to seeing. Let me just show you this one. This is Leiden in Amsterdam. And again, this started off very much about recording the bridge as it goes over the river, and then some of the architecture behind, but then you get sidetracked into these like amazing patterns down at the bottom. And you don't realize that's going to happen until you start drawing, because you don't quite know what you're going to discover, or you know what you're going to find really, really interesting. Any questions? I've got loads more pictures to show.
So just a little piece of housekeeping here. It's possible that we could extend this conversation, and I can only see three other people on the screen. So I don't know what people are thinking. It's hard to see, but it's possible to extend this conversation. So this call will end in 5 minutes and 43 seconds. And at that time, if you wait for 2 minutes and give me a chance, I can set up another live streaming call, and we can just continue on, Ian, if you are interested in that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, so if people want to do that, and it's the same link, it's the same everything, it's all the same. Just go back to however you got into this call, just go back to that and click on that link, and as soon as I go into the call will start, and you can join in as soon as I do that. It'll take me like 2 minutes to
maybe when people are away as well, Brenda, if they've got any questions they want to ask me as well, or any kind of pictures that I've shown them that they want to go back to and ask me some questions about those, that's absolutely fine. Really don't mind.
I have a question. That one, your very favorite sketch you did in Amsterdam with the black house in the background, was that house black?
Yeah, no, it was black, yeah. And actually that leads me quite nicely into how I choose the colours as well, because the colours are a combination of what you can see in front of you. So for example, that building is black, and the other building is kind of like a brown, like a sort of burned umber type thing. But when you look at the railings and you look at the kind of other things, that's a kind of an emotional colour. So for example, that would have been the real building, the real colour. That would have been the real colour. But this is obviously a real exaggeration around there. And that's to do with what the picture needs, and balancing out the colours that you've already put down. And it's also very much a kind of emotional thing as well. You know, it's like how you're feeling at the time. So I'm very mindful when I look at these pictures now of how cold I was, how it was absolutely bitter. So you're expressing some of that as well in a very kind of intuitive way. I noticed somebody just popped up on the screen, and how long do these take? They take, the minimum they take is probably two hours, anywhere between 2 and 3 hours, because most of the time I'm working, I'm doing a workshop as well. I'm actually teaching people at the same time. So obviously if I'm working on a workshop, the workshops last about 4 or 5 hours. But if I was left by myself, they would probably take about 2.5 hours, because there's a lot to look at. You know, I do try and put an awful lot into that. There's a huge amount of stuff I can see. So this one, for example, is in Den Haag. This was a workshop piece. So this lasted about 4 hours. There's probably the actual work itself on this took me about 2.5 hours, because the rest of the time I'm going around helping people and supporting people on the workshops. And then I came back the following day and probably spent another hour on it by myself as a demonstration. So altogether, there's probably over 3 hours work on this. Now, if I was to do this picture, say 5 years ago, I would have it finished in an hour, and it would have been finished. But the older I get, the longer they take. Not because I'm working slower, I'm probably working quicker. I'm seeing things
You're
quicker.
putting in more detail.
I'm seeing more. I'm seeing more. As I get more experience at this, I'm actually seeing more. And your eyes become accustomed to searching for things. So what happens is you look at a shape, you look in that tower there, and you start scanning it and thinking, what's going to go in that tower? What does it need? The space is too big on the page. The rest of it is clustered with detail. That's not working. Let's really, really scan. And sometimes I'll get off my bum and I'll walk into the scene. And I did this quite a lot in New Orleans. And you go right up to the facade and you start looking around and then you notice, oh, down the bottom there's a grid. Over there there's a drain pipe. There's a bit of graffiti on that wall. And you start really looking deep into the subject and thinking, well, I could put that in here. This is a good example, this Liverpool one, of really scanning the scene, really going deep into the subject and noticing the little bit of graffiti down there.
Can you hold that thought for a moment, Ian? So we have 1 minute left in this call, and then it's going to cut off. So I have set up another call. And to get into that other Zoom call, you'll just go to the exact same link that you used to get into this Zoom call. Okay? So we're going to say goodbye for now. And I hope that you'll just click on that link and you should be able to start up into a new Zoom call. Okay, everyone?
Bye for now.
See you in a bit.